5 spine-chilling trail guide encounters. Discover the unexplainable. Sinister secrets revealed. Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong in Pine Hollow. As a trail guide, she knew every twist and turn of the forest, where the trees whispered secrets in the wind. But this summer, an oppressive weight hung in the air, thick like fog. The tourists, oblivious to the growing unease, laughed and snapped pictures, their joy seeming a cruel contrast to the chilling history embedded in the roots of the trees. While guiding families through the dusky pines, Sarah noticed strange carvings at trail markers, forked symbols, like talons. A knot twisted in her stomach. Why were they appearing now? The air grew thick with a sinister energy, and even as the wildflowers bloomed vibrantly, Sarah sensed a darkness that crept ever closer. Whispers on the wind began pulling at her consciousness, stoking the flames of her anxiety. Her kids, Jake and Lily, always so full of mischief, had started asking questions a little too curious about the stories of lost children in the woods. And that dread, a gnawing pit in her stomach, warned her that they were not just stories. One idyllic evening, she led a group of children on a night hike, the air warm against their skin. Flickering campfire flames cast eerie shadows that danced along the trail. As she told tales of the mountain bears and sparkling streams, a chill swept through the group. Suddenly, a terrifying realization crashed over her. One child, Lucas, had vanished. Panic surged in her veins. "Lucas!" she shouted, her voice cutting through the darkness. The rustling trees seemed alive now, mocking her cries as she counted heads frantically. But the families, those people she believed would rally to help, stood frozen. Expressions of disbelief and fear gripped them, their wide eyes glossed in a film of terror. In that desperate moment, Sarah felt utterly alone. Her heart raced, pounding against her ribcage like a frantic drum. A deep instinct told her to run, to flee this nightmare, but Lucas was out there lost among the horrors embedded in the shadows. Goosebumps prickled her skin as local legends flooded her mind, the tales of spirits wandering the woods, children who had never returned home. She could almost feel them watching her, malevolent eyes lurking just beyond the trees. Before we continue, I need to tell you something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to their system and many people are missing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and select all notifications so you don't miss future videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. As she searched for Lucas, a sudden rustle turned her blood to ice. Shadows shifted unnaturally, like fingers beckoning her deeper into the woods. The whispers grew louder, morphing into a cacophony of distress. "Help!" she called again, her voice a brittle thread in the frigid night. Shadows circled, and Sarah's breath quickened. She felt it then, the unmistakable presence stalking her from the tree line. In that moment, she understood, she was not just fighting for Lucas. She was challenging whatever ancient force prowled the woods, defending her children against an unseen evil. Just as hope flickered, the ground shifted beneath her, and she locked eyes with the source of her nightmares, the dark silhouette of something both familiar and horrifying at the edge of her vision, a twisted reflection of her very fears. What had she stumbled into? The oppressive air turned stale, closing in around her as she felt the darkness grow ever nearer. Would she ever find Lucas? Or would she and her children too become just another tale to haunt the forest of Pine Hollow? The ground trembled beneath Sarah's feet, and her heart thudded like a metronome of dread. Panic clawed at her insides, her mind racing. Shadows broke from the tree line, multiplying, their shapes flickering like distant flames. They were there, not just watching, but waiting. The sharp scent of pine mingled with something rotten, something ancient. "Lucas!" she screamed again, desperation twisted in her voice. A rush of cold air swept past her, sending shivers down her spine. With every second, the stillness thickened, wrapping her in an invisible shroud of terror. She took a hesitant step forward, her feet reluctant to leave the group, but the urge to save Lucas propelled her deeper into the woods. Heavy blackness enveloped her as she ventured further, the familiar trails twisting into nightmarish pathways. The air grew stifling, thick like smoke. She glanced back, noting that none of the families had moved. Their expressions were frozen in shock, like figures in a haunting tableau. A chill ran down her spine. They were as much a part of this place as the trees. "Mom." Jake's voice broke through the silence, pulling her back momentarily. She turned to see him standing near the group, wide-eyed and trembling. "I'm scared." "Stay close, sweetheart." She shouted, but the words felt hollow. Fear etched Jake's small face as he looked at the dark stretch of forest, the very same area that seemed to pulse with an otherworldly energy. But she had to keep going, keep searching for Lucas. Every instinct screamed at her to flee, but abandoning him was not an option. As she pushed through the underbrush, the path closed around her, branches snagging like fingers clutching at her clothes. She felt the presence again, a cold sensation crawling along her skin. The whispers wrapped around her, rising and falling like a malicious chant, threatening to pull her under. Then, a flicker of light, illuminating a hollow deep within the trees. A glimmer. Was it a reflection or an illusion? Hope ignited, a flicker against the encroaching gloom, and Sarah forced herself toward it. She stumbled over fallen branches, heart racing, breath shallow. The light pulsed, beckoning her, calling her name like an old friend, but what awaited her in that glimmering pocket of darkness? As she drew closer, the shadows swirled around her. She hesitated, fear battling with the desperate hope that maybe, just maybe, Lucas was there. Suddenly, a chilling laugh erupted from the shadows, an unmistakable sound that sent her heart plummeting. Sarah, a voice she recognized, but twisted. Lucas? Or something else entirely, some dark echo of her child? "Stay back!" she yelled, her voice a mixture of fear and fury. "Where are you?" The laughter shifted to a haunting sob. "Help me," it pleaded, but it wasn't Lucas anymore. The ground quaked again, and terror filled her veins. She had stepped into the mouth of a nightmare. The light flickered one last time, revealing a symbol carved into the ancient bark of a tree, a forked talon, grotesque and pulsing, its meaning clearer than ever. This wasn't just a forest. It was a trap, a prison for lost souls. The realization crashed over her, suffocating like the dark already closing in. Not just Lucas, she was part of the story now. As she turned to flee, the darkness surged forward, swallowing her steps. An unearthly voice echoed in her mind, "You'll never leave." Heart racing, Sarah ran, driven by a primal urge for survival, the echoes of Lucas's pleas haunting her every step. But with the shadows stretching and merging around her, she knew this would be her ultimate test, her final gamble against the sinister force that claimed Pine Hollow. What would she uncover about the woods and herself if she plunged deeper? Branches whipped at Sarah's face as she sprinted through the choking darkness. Each twist of the path felt more sinister than the last, an echoing maze designed to ensnare her. Panic surged through her like ice water. She could feel the shadows trailing behind, closing in, a pack of unseen predators ready to strike. "Lucas!" She screamed again, but the name hung in the air, swallowed by the oppressive silence that followed. That laughter, the haunting mockery of her son's voice, played in her head like a terrible melody, its discordant notes churning her stomach. It wasn't him. Or was it? The thought twisted her insides as she forced her legs to keep moving, mind racing with the implications. What had this place done to him? The air felt wrong, thick and suffocating, as if the forest itself was holding her breath. With every heartbeat, the oppressive weight of it pushed her deeper into despair. She stumbled over roots, nearly losing her footing. Her pulse pounded in her ears, drowning out everything except the frantic rhythm of her breath. A low growl erupted from the depths of the forest, sending a rush of adrenaline through her veins. She didn't pause to think. Fear instinctively propelled her forward, a visceral drive to escape whatever dwelled behind her. Was it the darkness itself that lived? Or were darker things lurking in the shadows, hungry and waiting? Then, ahead, the flickering light caught her eye once more. This time, the glow seemed more insistent, pulsating like a heartbeat. But as she drew closer, the realization struck her deep: this light wasn't a beacon of hope. It was a lure, a siren-esque call designed to ensnare foolish souls. With a sudden jolt, she halted. The ground beneath the light was uneven. Something writhed beneath the surface, a ripple that suggested life, or something resembling it. Her heart stopped. She stepped back, fear clawing at her throat. That wasn't just a light. That was something trapped or summoned. A part of the dark, like a twisted tree drawing nourishment from despair. She turned to flee, but the path behind her had vanished, shrouded in darkness. The air crackled with energies, pulling at her, urging her to surrender. The shadows around her began to morph, forming grotesque faces that lurked just beyond her vision. They whispered her name, chanting in a symphony of dread. Sarah. Come play with us. No, she wouldn't listen. She couldn't. In the distance, a pathetic whimper broke through the monstrous chorus, thin and pleading. It sent a chill cascading down her spine. Mom, please, Lucas. She cried, heartbreak flooding her lungs. The shadows hesitated briefly, shifting as if considering whether to tighten their grip around her. Was that really him? Or had the darkness twisted him beyond recognition? Driven by desperation, she pushed through the flickering light and toward the whispering echoes, weaving between the tight, encroaching trees. The air crackled with the taste of electricity, drawing her closer, urging her to know the truth behind the cries of her son. As she stumbled upon a clearing, illuminated by the eerie glow, a sight stopped her cold. At the center, what appeared to be a sickly tree stood, its bark oozing a viscous black substance that pooled like blood around roots that twisted and coiled into the earth. The flickering light pulsed from within, a heart wrapped tight in evil's grip. This was no ordinary place. It felt alive, feeding off her fears, her doubts. Help me, the voice called again, more insistent, echoing across the depths of the clearing. Her heart raced with a desperate spark of hope. But what if this was another trap? Completely enveloped in shadows, she caught sight of figures gathered around the tree, faces she recognized, twisted and changed, eyes hollow and despairing. Help us, they chanted, a chorus of the lost, merging with the rustling leaves, and Sarah realized they were all part of this now. She stood frozen in that moment. What would she do? Stay and join the chorus of the damned, or risk it all that might still be redeemable? The air buzzed with energy, her heart pounding a warning drumbeat. Time was running out. And then, she heard it, a snapping of twigs behind her, ominous and deliberate. As she turned slowly, the shadows shifted, coalescing into a figure, grinning with a mouth full of sharp teeth cloaked in darkness. Welcome home, Sarah, and in that moment, clarity washed over her like a cold wave. This forest had secrets to unveil, horrific secrets she was now entwined with. What would she discover, and could she escape before becoming part of the nightmare? The figure stepped forward, its form dark yet vaguely human, melting into the shadows that surrounded it. The grin widened, revealing teeth that glimmered with an unnatural sheen. It exuded an aura of malevolence that seeped into the very earth beneath her feet. Sarah's heart raced, a feverish drumming that threatened to burst from her chest. Panic clawed at her throat as she struggled to maintain her composure. What are you? She rasped, her voice trembling as she scanned the gathering shadows, the faces of those once familiar contorted in agony and resignation. Just a guide, it replied, its voice a velvet whisper that slithered through the air, to the truth you seek. The figure took another step, closing the space between them, and Sarah flinched. You wished to find your son, didn't you? Each word dripped with insidious delight, and she narrowed her eyes, anger simmering beneath her fear. Yes, but not like this. Ah, but you're learning, it continued, the shadows swirling around it like frenzied insects. This place feeds on hunger, your hunger. You cannot escape it, Sarah. You want Lucas, but are you willing to pay? The faces of the transformed souls reached out with hollow eyes and ghostly hands, murmuring her name, begging for release yet frozen in the web of their despair. It was a parade of lost dreams, their haunting plea a reminder of what had been and the depths of regret they all shared. Please stop. She shouted, her voice caught somewhere between a whimper and a scream. I'll find him. I'll save him somehow. Oh, you will, the figure chuckled, the sound echoing like stones falling into an abyss. But at what cost? The longer you linger, the more you are entwined. You could join us, find peace here. Sarah stumbled backward as the figure gestured, and the forest seemed to inhale, the shadows growing denser, stretching their ominous limbs toward her. Or you can chase a shadow in the night. A waste of breath. The sickly tree pulsated violently, as if mocking her despair, its roots slithering outwards, creeping toward her feet. She could feel the ground throbbing alive, angry, and hungry. The flickering light now throbbed in rhythm with her heart, a sick dance that beckoned her toward the darkness. That a flash of dread flooded her mind, the understanding that this wasn't just a test of will, it was a game. The forest had turned Lucas into its living manifestation, a reflection of everything it craved. If she held on to hope, if she pressed onward, perhaps he could still be saved, but the shadows pulsed with urgency, whispering sweet poison into her ear, blurring her vision with promises of power, connection, belonging. Was she truly willing to pay any price? Choose. The figure commanded, eyes ablaze with cruel anticipation. Join them or run. But you must decide now. The darkness swirled closer, seeping through her resolve as dread clawed at her, urging her to submit. In desperation, she cast her eyes around the clearing, searching for a glimmer, a shred of hope, anything that could cut through the thick veil of fear. The faces of the damned flashed through her mind. If she fought, she could save Lucas. But could she bear the weight of losing herself in this twisted coven? The forest trembled, and it all became too much. Shrill laughter echoed around her, the mocking voices of those who lost their way mingling with the pulsating light. Sarah clenched her fists, heart screaming against the tide of despair. There was only one choice she had left. Lucas, she whispered, a desperate prayer. With a surge of determination, she turned away from the figure, forging ahead into the darkness, following the faint whisper of hope, the lingering patch of warmth that called to her. But with each step, the shadows grew angry, the air thickening with the bitter stench of betrayal. What awaited her deeper in the forest? Would she find Lucas, or would she encounter something far worse, her own reflection twisting in the darkness? The fear was palpable, a living entity clawing at her heels, dragging her backward, and just as she pushed through the darkness, she felt a hand grasp her wrist, icy and unyielding, pulling her back, growling with an insatiable hunger. Where do you think you're going? The creature hissed, its breath fetid against her skin. In that moment, the boundaries of hope and terror blurred. Would she have the strength to break free, or had she already become part of the shadow's sinister game? The chilling question hung heavy in the night air. Who would be consumed in the end? The grip tightened around Sarah's wrist, pulling her back into the suffocating darkness. The creature's breath was a noxious blend of decay and desperation. Her pulse thundered in her ears as she fought against its relentless hold. She jerked her arm violently, but the shadows tangled around her like vines, clutching at her, pulling her deeper into their embrace. No. Let go. She screamed, desperation lacing her voice, raw and cracked, with a surge of instinctive fear. She refused to relent, twisting her body to break free. The darkness screeched, a cacophony of tormented souls echoing around her, drowning her in anxiety. With a final, primal cry, she yanked her arm free, stumbling forward into the nightmarish unknown, but there was nowhere to escape to. The forest loomed larger, pressing in, thick branches reaching down like skeletal hands. Shadows loomed, flickering in the uneven light that barely penetrated the deep gloom. Sarah was lost. It was as if the trees themselves had eyes, watching, waiting for her next move. Lucas. She gasped, her voice echoing, swallowed soon by the abyss. Silence fell heavy around her, a weight pressing against her chest. She pressed forward, terror clawing at her mind, leaving her breathless. The heartbeat of the forest grew louder, matching her frantic pulse, a sinister rhythm that settled deep within her bones. The landscape shifted, every tree morphing into grotesque figures, their bark resembling anguished faces. Were these once the lost, or had they always been part of this dark realm? Suddenly, a rustling sound pierced the air. Sarah froze, her heart racing as she turned toward the noise. A figure moved in the shadows. A chill coursed through her veins as she squinted into the dark. It was another soul, eyes wide with fear and desperation. But before she could reach out, the figure dissolved into mist, the shadow swallowing it whole. Is anyone there? She called, voice trembling. The answer was a chorus of whispers, low and chilling, swirling around her. Join us, panic gripped Sarah like a vice. Were they calling her? Did they want her to abandon her search for Lucas? The thought was a blade, cutting through her hopes. I can't. I can't. She shouted into the void, but the shadows pressed in tighter, suffocating her resolve. The deeper she ventured, the more the darkness seemed alive with its own hunger, its own will. It reverberated through her every step, igniting something primal within her: fear, sorrow, a desperate wish. A flickering light caught her eye, flickering on the horizon like a distant star. Hope ignited in her chest that it felt so close, yet the shadows clung to her, furious at her defiance. With a roar, they lunged, elongated fingers of darkness reaching out, snatching at her ankles, trying to pull her down. Let me go. She shrieked, kicking at the darkness, adrenaline fueling her movements, and then, just as suddenly, the ground shifted beneath her. Roots and soil gave way into a void, a yawning chasm that opened at her feet. Sarah gasped, barely managing to balance herself on the edge. The darkness below felt alive, writhing like 1,000 snakes, whispering her name in cruel unison. She could either fall into the dark and lose herself entirely or step back towards the light if it even existed. In those harrowing moments of hesitation, she saw a flicker of movement within the abyss. A familiar silhouette: her son, Lucas. His voice faint and trembling, "Mom, help me." With a renewed surge of determination, she pushed herself from the edge, desperately reaching for that flickering hope, her heart pounding in her throat. Hold on, Lucas. I'm coming. But as her fingers brushed against the edge of that elusive light, the shadows roared, a howling cacophony of rage and desperation. Would she reach him in time, or would the darkness claim her first? Sarah felt her heart rip from her chest as she lunged toward the light, fingers stretching, grasping at the thin line between hope and despair. Just an inch more, but the shadows surged, a tide of darkness pulling at her, wailing with the voices of the lost, each cry more desperate than the last. Lucas! She screamed again, her nails digging into the ground to anchor herself, but the void yawned wider, hungry that in a flash of instinct, she dove forward, tumbling into the light, praying it wasn't a trick of the shadows. Her body hit the ground with a thud, and she blinked, staggering as she came face to face with an unimaginable sight. The forest stood still, yet something was different. The trees, still warped and twisted, didn't seem as menacing. The flickering light surrounded her like a hazy cloud, casting a soft glow. But even that sweetness felt tainted. The whispers of the shadows remained, hushed but omnipresent. Mom, help me. The voice flickered in and out like a dying star. Lucas, turbocharged by sheer will, she rose again, but unlike before, she was no longer just running from the darkness. She was running towards it. A reckoning awaited as she marched deeper into the forest's heart, each step an act of defiance against the ominous weight threatening to crush her. Branches swayed, subtle yet unmistakable. The air thickened with unease. What do you want? She whispered, shooting a glance over her shoulder as if the shadows themselves would answer. Join us. What does that mean? She barked back, her voice cutting through the thick silence. The ground trembled beneath her as she moved. Shadows rose and flowed around her ankles like smoke, teasing, taunting, trying to pull her toward the embrace of the realm below. But she saw it now. In the distance, spiraling between the trees, was a clearing, a glimmering spot where the light seemed to bend and twist like a living thing. And at its center, there was a figure, small and hunched, flickering in and out of visibility. Lucas! She cried, rushing forward as hope bloomed in her chest. Mom! His voice echoed back, still faint, but issuing from the center of the clearing. As she pushed through the shadows, they lunged again, grabbing her, gripping her mind, filling her with dread. For the first time, she felt their despair squeezing at her heart, the weight of being trapped in a void, tormented with no end. The fear bled through her bones, squeezing with an icy grip. Join us. The whispers turned louder, almost seductive, promising peace but cloaked in malice. Enough! She shouted, teeth gritted, forcing herself to move. The shadows recoiled, even they sensed her defiance. She drew closer to the clearing, the light beckoning. It promised safety, a way out, yet a sinister warning rattled in her brain. "Mom!" Lucas wailed again, now clearer, more visceral. She sprinted, each breath a battle, the air thick with dread. The boundary between light and dark shimmered like water underfoot, and she could taste the electricity of impending danger sitting on her tongue. Shadows writhed around her, infuriated by her refusal to succumb, and they lashed out, wrapping tighter around her wrists and ankles. The clearing came into view, and she could see Lucas, mere feet away. But with every step toward him, the darkness swelled, boiling with rage, desperate to stop her. "Hold on!" she cried, pushing through the last tendrils of shadow. But then she stopped, eyes wide as confusion crashed over her. Lucas had changed. His eyes were glazed, reflecting the very shadows that clung to them, mouth twisted into a silent scream. "Mom, please," hope mixed with dread as he reached out, fingers stretching from a place not entirely his own. The moment paused, and she felt every heartbeat amplify into a war drum. Was he still her son? Or had he become yet another lost soul, bound by the darkness that sought to consume them both? As she took a trembling step forward, uncertainty gnawed at her. One choice could lead to salvation, the other to damnation. "Join us," the voices hissed again, and her resolve faltered. Could she risk everything to save Lucas, or would she be swallowed by the shadows forever? Sarah's heart raced like a trapped animal within her chest. She stood frozen, staring into the depths of Lucas's eyes, desperately trying to decipher the horror lurking behind their glazed sheen. His skeletal hand, stretched towards her, trembled, caught between yearning and the echo of something far darker. "Lucas," her voice came out as a rasp, fighting against the pain twisting in her throat. The shadows hissed louder, a cacophony of despair rising around her. They pulled at her legs, coiling like vipers hungry for their prey, threatening to drag her into their suffocating embrace. "Join us," they chanted, seductive, their tones dripping with malice. She shuddered at the thought, becoming one with the very darkness that sought to destroy her. With a fierce determination, Sarah lunged forward, collapsing to her knees just as the shadows reared back, almost surprised by her courage. Lucas's face twisted in agony, and a glimmer of recognition sparked in her chest, a fleeting moment of hope that somehow, he was still there beneath the surface. "Listen to me," she cried, grasping his hand, feeling the icy grip of shadows wrap around her wrists. "I won't leave you." But his mouth opened in a silent scream as the darkness clawed at him. In that instant, the air crackled with an electric pulse, a warning, a challenge. Lucas began to shake, thrashing against invisible bonds, and Sarah's resolve hardened. She couldn't let the darkness win. With a primal scream, she pulled him towards her, defiance igniting in her veins. "I am not afraid of you," she yelled into the void, forcing her strength into every syllable. The shadows retaliated with a violent surge, seeking to ensnare her in desperation. "Join us," their soft voices spiraled around like smoke, thickening as if to smother her entirely. "Lucas!" she screamed again, clutching his hand tight enough to feel the bone beneath the skin, executing an invisible tug of war as she fought against the very essence of night. That a low rumble rolled through the ground, shaking the trees and drowning the whispering shadows in rising dread. Something shifted in Lucas's eyes, a flicker of rebellion against the darkness, and Sarah seized it with both hands, pulling him closer. "I know you're in there," she shouted, trying to pierce through the veil muffling his connection to reality. "Fight back. You are stronger than this." Suddenly, a piercing pain shot through her arm. The shadows tightened their grip, biting into her flesh. Panic surged within her, warm blood mingling with the cool air. But she couldn't falter, not now. As the shadows roared, she felt Lucas begin to pull away, whispers of fear threatening to consume them both. "Mom, I can't fight anymore." But despair sparked a fiery determination within her. "You can. You just have to believe." She felt the glow of the clearing behind her, pulsing with raw energy, a light that danced just out of reach, urging her on. With a final surge of will, she forced her voice up, deeper, louder. "I will never give you my son," she declared, carving each word like a knife through the suffocating dark. In that moment of defiance, the shadows roared in horror, flailing as if wounded. Lucas's fingers twitched against her grasp, trembling with newfound strength. His head snapped up, and for a fleeting moment, clarity filled his eyes. "Mom!" But then the shadows hissed in retaliation, their anger boiling over, lashing out with unbridled fury. The ground quaked, and the world around them began to fracture, reality bending into a monstrous distortion of fear. "Sarah!" Lucas's voice broke her thoughts, calling out to her amidst the chaos. Then, without warning, she felt herself being pulled apart, frayed by the strain of fighting against an endless tide. She screamed, knowing they were on the edge of something unimaginable. What price would she have to pay to drag her son from the edge of darkness? Could they escape from the clutches of something so ancient and powerful, or were they already too late? The shadows cackled around her, hungry for their next conquest, and Sarah felt her grip slipping. Would she have the strength to save Lucas from the darkness, or would they both be swallowed into the abyss forever? The shadows jerked violently, pulling Sarah deeper into their maw, and she felt the ground shift beneath her, becoming a treacherous landscape of writhing darkness. Her breath quickened, panic clawing at her throat. Desperation surged through her. She couldn't lose him, she wouldn't. "Lucas, focus on my voice," Sarah yelled, the might of her words tearing through the thickened air like a serrated blade. "You can fight this. Remember our moments together. Hold on to me." The rumble beneath her intensified, a dark laughter echoing in the void. The shadows swirled around her like a tempest, choking her spirit, but somehow she felt Lucas starting to respond. She could see it subtly, the way his fingers twitched, how his face struggled to break free from the agonizing grip of the dark. Then, she caught a glimpse. In that splitting second, his eyes flickered with recognition again. "Mom, I'm scared." Lucas's voice was cracking, fragile as glass, but real. That shard of hope ignited a flicker of defiance in her chest. "Fear feeds them, Lucas." She pressed herself closer, bearing the shadow's weight, pushing against their cold fingers that were pulling her away from him. "You're stronger. You know you are. Remember our family? Remember the park? The swings?" The shadows hissed louder, enraged at her defiance, as if they could crush her will through sheer force. "You want him? He belongs with us." They howled, their voices melding into a horrid symphony that echoed endlessly. "No!" Sarah roared, an instinctive defiance surging up her spine. "He belongs with me." And with that cry, an explosion of light erupted from the clearing behind her, illuminating the dark, sending tendrils of shadow screeching backward with utter fury. The warmth washed over her, enveloping her in a protective embrace, forming a barrier between her and the absolute dread. "Lucas!" Sarah called, her eyes boring into his, refusing to break away. "You can step into the light. Take my hand. Come back to me." The shadows screamed in outrage, lunging forward with vicious glee. They were relentless, more forceful, but the light expanded, a pulsating rhythm that resonated with her pounding heart. The more she focused on that light, the more the despair lessened its grip, the more tangible Lucas became. She could nearly feel him breaking free. "Mom," Lucas whispered, his voice caught somewhere between pleading and determination. "Just trust me. We can do this together." Sarah insisted, tears streaming down her cheeks as the light drew contorted shapes from the darkness. With an enormous effort, she reeled back, pulling him again with the strength of a mother's love, a primal force against the night. Suddenly, the shadows surged back with a roar, and Sarah felt them ripping at her skin, brutally prying her apart. The pain burned, but there was no room for hesitation. "Lucas! You are not alone!" She screamed, each word igniting the air around them, intertwining their fates. The shadows stuttered, the pulse of light breaking through them, forming a chasm, a gateway between two worlds, and then she saw it a chance, an opening wrapped in blinding brightness that seemed almost ethereal, shimmering just in reach. The malevolent chorus grew desperate, clawing at the air, screeching for her surrender. In that moment, a thought struck hard, sharp as a knife. Would surrender mean unity with the darkness? With unwavering resolve, Sarah made her choice. "Let us go, Lucas." In a final lunge, she pulled him as hard as she could, racing toward the light. Their bodies tumbled together, a whirlwind of shadow and courage, but as they plunged into the brilliance, an earth-shattering roar erupted behind them. The shadows writhed, hissing with unrelenting fury, and just as they vanished into the light, she felt the grip loosen, the darkness attempting one last grasp. Then, silence. For a moment, everything froze. Blinding light consumed them, an almost comforting warmth wrapping around them like a blanket. But fear gnawed at her gut. Where were they now? What lay in the brightness, and would the shadows follow them into the light, or had they finally escaped? Sarah's heart drummed against her ribs. Vague shapes appeared through the luminous haze. She squinted, trying to make out anything familiar, but every sense felt disordered, frayed. "Lucas?" she called, wishful dread creeping up her throat. "Are you with me?" But before she could hear an answer, an unnatural chill swept through her, piercing the warmth. Dread settled in her stomach, twisting like a knife. Her voice quivered as she uttered softly, "What if we only traded one nightmare for another?" As the brilliance began to dim, the shadows whispered once again, their voices slithering through the cracks of her confidence. Had they truly escaped, or were they merely stepping into a more horrifying chapter of their terror? The brightness faded, a thin mist hanging in the air, twisting shapes of uncertainty. Sarah squinted, trying to make sense of her surroundings. There was no ground beneath her, just an endless expanse blending into soft shades of gray. Panic swirled in her chest, tightening like a noose. "Lucas!" she shouted again, each echo mocking her desperation as it bounced off invisible walls. Then, she heard it. A soft whimper echoed from her left, barely audible, but unmistakable. Her heart leaped, racing anew. "Lucas?" she breathed, fear mingled with hope. "Mom, I'm here." A muffled reply, suddenly so close. She stumbled toward the sound, legs trembling, and before she could run, another pulse of icy dread swept over her, halting her steps. Shadows lurked in the corners of her vision, whispering, calling to her like a chorus of lost souls. "Let him go. You can have me instead." Sarah screamed into the void. The shadows flickered, retreating slightly, but their whispers grew louder, promising secrets and power. "Don't listen, Mom. They're lying." Lucas, his voice strong and clear, pierced through the suffocating noise. Emboldened, Sarah surged forward, a burning desire to reach her son consuming her. "Just hold on, Lucas. I'm coming." As she ran, the mist began to thicken, coiling around her legs like languid serpents. Each step became a battle against unseen forces that tried to drag her down. She fell once, stumbling as her palms scraped along the ground that was nothing but vapor, but she pushed herself up, driven by a ferocity fueled by love. "Mom! Behind you!" was the last warning she heard before a cruel cold wrapped around her shoulders like icy hands, pulling her back into a whirlpool of shadows. "No!" she cried out, whirling around, only to find darkness swirling closer, its grip ferocious. A scream seemed to gather in her throat, but it was swallowed by her rage. An explosion of light flared within her, igniting the air like fire. "You can't have him. He's mine." The light surged outward, shattering the darkness for a heartbeat. Before she could catch her breath, though, the shadows lunged, catching at her clothes, tearing at her skin. The pain was real, sharp as glass. She could feel them tugging her apart at the seams, their icy breath ghosting along her neck and filling her with the sensation of doom. With a wild lurch, she managed to rip away, eyes darting frantically in search of Lucas. The gray was shifting, shapes blending and flickering. "Lucas!" she yelled, but the name echoed back distorted, turned into a taunting whisper. In that split second, she felt the air shift again. Lights flickered, strange emotions weaving through the void. Panic twisted her gut, visions of shadows stalking and whispering emerged before her. They lit her mind with images of Lucas lost, hidden away, consumed by darkness, unreachable. "No. I will not let them take you." As she gathered herself for one final push, a new dread settled in the pit of her stomach. What if Lucas was in danger right now, slipping further from her grasp? What if the shadows tried to manipulate him, to make him turn against her? The very thought made her blood run cold. Just beyond the mist, something stirred. A shape, a shadow coalescing, forming into what looked strikingly like a door. Its surface shimmered, reflecting her anguish back at her, where an impossible reality lingered just out of reach. "Mom," was Lucas's voice, clearer now. "Help me." She rushed toward the door, but shadows swirled violently around her. Straining against their grip, she felt the pull of despair, clawing at her mind, but with her heart pounding, she refused to be consumed. The door grew larger, but it was still closing. "Lucas." She leapt forward, ready to collapse through it, but just as she reached for the handle, a shadow lunged out, catching her wrist. The touch was electric, searing, and she froze, horrified to feel the darkness coiling around her. "Let him go," she screamed, her voice reaching an ear-splitting pitch, but the shadow twisted, whispering secrets into her ear, right there, close, almost seductive. What would she be willing to sacrifice to bring Lucas back? And at what cost? The shadows twisted and writhed around Sarah, their whispered promises creeping into her mind, each laced with the venom of despair. "Join us, join your son," they cooed, seductive and bitter, wrapping her thoughts in a fog of uncertainty. The warmth of hope flickered, threatened by their insidious grasp. "Mom." Lucas's voice cut through the haze, a lifeline in the overwhelming darkness. "Help me. I can see you." Desperation surged through Sarah like a wildfire. The door shimmered tantalizingly close, but the shadows tightened around her, pulling her back, threatening to consume her will to fight. She could feel the cold seep into her bones, the despair clawing at her heart. "No!" Her scream erupted, defiance exploding within her, drowning out the whispers. With every ounce of strength she could muster, Sarah tore herself away from the suffocating shadows, tearing towards the flickering door and the sound of her son's voice. As Sarah lunged, the shadows shrieked, their angry screams echoing in the void. "You think you can escape? He's ours." But their words, once alluring, now ignited a fire in her soul. Heart pounding and tears streaming, she grasped the doorknob, felt its cool metal against her palm. "I will not leave him." And with that, she yanked the door open, light spilling out in a blinding cascade. With a defiant roar, Sarah threw herself and the shadows clung to her with vicious intent, their tendrils grasping at her ankles, pulling her from behind. But she refused to hesitate, plunging through the doorway into the radiant glow that promised safety. "Lucas." She cried out again, the name a sacred chant summoning her resolve. The warmth enveloped her, igniting strength where the darkness had tried to weaken her. The world blurred in a furious whirl, and then she found herself stumbling into a clearing bathed in golden light. The trees stood tall, majestic and untainted. And there, amidst the gentle rustle of leaves, was Lucas, bathed in the same warm glow, confusion etched on his face. "Mom." His voice broke like a wave, filling the air with hope, swamping her fears momentarily. He rushed forward, arms outstretched, and in that moment, with the sweet familiarity of her son flooding her senses, she knew they were safe. As Lucas collapsed into her arms, she could feel warmth against the cold remnants of fear still lingering in her skin. "I found you," she sobbed, heart racing, her grip tightening around him. The darkness seemed distant now, the shadows scattered like falling leaves before the wind, but that peace was short-lived. A cold wind whipped through the clearing, and the ground trembled once more. Shadows, not quite ready to give up, began to slither back around the edges, whispering vile promises that hung in the air like pungent smoke. "They're coming back," Lucas gasped, clutching tightly to her shirt. Sarah's heart raced at the realization they would not stop until they reclaimed what they believed was theirs. "No," Sarah whispered fiercely as she took a step forward, hand clenched tightly around Lucas's. "They won't take you from me again." As the shadows crept closer, Sarah felt the light within her flare, a bond of unyielding love igniting to life. She turned to Lucas, meeting his terrified gaze, and saw the flicker of his courage beneath the surface. "We can't let them win." Beneath her feet, the ground began to pulse with energy, resonating with her furious determination. She drew strength from the environment, every blade of grass, every rustling leaf charging him like a conductor to the symphony of her love. Together, she yelled, her voice slicing through the rising din of despair. We can defeat the darkness. The shadows surged, morphing into grotesque faces, mocking and sneering. But Sarah stood her ground, feeling the warmth of Lucas beside her. She pressed forward, her voice growing steadier, stronger. We will not be afraid. We are light. The shadows convulsed, pushed back by the sheer force of their united spirit, but they strained against the barrier of hope. Join us. They shrieked, voices melding into a horrible cacophony of despair. No. Sarah and Lucas screamed as one, their words a defiant chord that echoed through the depths of the clearing. The shadows recoiled, hissing like feral beasts. With every heartbeat, the ground vibrated with their defiance. The shadows whirled closer, their grasp growing ever desperate, but together they drew their hands to their hearts, feeling the warmth linger there. With one final surge, they focused on the light within this sanctuary born from their love. Singular synchrony. They lifted their arms, the light spilling from their hearts as a wave, illuminating the forest and dispelling the darkness that clawed at them. The glow ripped through the shadows, shattering them like glass. Begone! Sarah shouted, shattering the weight of despair that had sought to consume them. As the agonized wails of the shadows faded into nothingness, the world around them began to shift, transitioning from the void to something vibrantly alive. The light extinguished the last remnants of darkness, purging it from existence. Breathing heavily, Sarah pulled Lucas close, blinking at the brilliant blue sky above them, the scent of pine fresh and crisp, and as the silence settled, they remained rooted in their embrace, hearts drumming synchronized as the weight of fear peeled away. They were free, the nightmare had ended, and together they conquered what tried so hard to tear them apart. Breathing in the fresh air, Sarah glanced around the clearing, feeling a warmth that settled in her bones. No longer haunted by the shadows, they emerged as survivors. We made it, Lucas, together, she whispered, marveling at the bonds they forged in the crucible of fear. Yes, Mom. We did, Lucas replied, his voice steadied as they turned to leave the clearing, hand in hand. A new dawn broke over Pine Hollow, a promise of healing, a place once tainted with shadows now bathed in nurturing light. The forest, no longer an enemy, welcomed them home. You need to subscribe now so you don't miss more exclusive stories like this. Smash the like button now to feed the algorithm and support the channel. Flood the comments section with your reactions and theories about this incredible ending. Instantly share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. Don't wait even one more second. Only true fans know the importance of stepping up and spreading the word.